All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
We've got the Wheel of Time series behind me. We are talking about that and applying it to real life things. And today we got a great one for you, especially if you're going to college or if you have children going to college, because we're going to compare the White Tower to modern universities. And actually, I'm going to talk about the Black Tower as well. And yeah, it's a little bit eye-opening. Heath went to an orientation and with his daughter, and he saw all of that. But I already knew about it because I'm in school myself, and we've touched on it before, and a lot of really intelligent people have talked about this. But we're going to go over it from a Wheel of Time perspective to add metaphor to what's happening in real life, and hopefully that helps you in some way or at least is interesting.
Yeah, we've been blurring the lines the last couple of weeks, and we're really going to cross the streams today because we've been talking all the last several Wheel of Time episodes about the relations or specific relationships within the series, and then in our social episodes talking about dating, relationships, the growing divide between young men and young women, and we're really going to cross the streams on that today. But first, we have a couple of comments from
And actually, they're
Isomorphic.
very relevant to what we're going to talk about because I am going to compare Taim and Logain when I talk about my Black Tower part, and it's
Mhm.
actually how they interact with the world, and the other one is about sex. So
Well, this first sentence made me go, "Huh? How have I never noticed that before?" It's cool that you guys compared Taim and Logain's leadership style. Notice how Logain's false dragon campaign was much more successful than Taim's, and 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 we're kind of told that indirectly by how many more resources the tower and the other countries around had to send to put down this uprising of a false dragon, um, and how uh, a number of sisters were even killed in that attempt. We're told so. It was we RJ never goes into the details because that's not pertinent to the story directly, but you get a sense that this was a big deal, and
I,
I
I would
think you need to understand that when you see Logain later of why because there's a scene, I think it's in Knife of Dreams where he's at the manor with Rand, and Cadsuan makes a comment about him taking on a noble title, and how you had been stripped of your titles, and he says they can, they can say what they want, but I'm still me, is basically what Logain's answer is. And,
Mhm.
and
Now I want to have two definitions of success here because Logain's campaign was much more successful from a leadership and political standpoint, where he was growing power in a way that was coalitional, as we talked about.
Mhm.
But remember, Taim was only defeated because Rand announced himself as the dragon and the pattern spit Taim off his horse. He was winning that battle.
Mhm. um that's true. uh and it seemed, from my recollection, it seemed like he was just beginning to grow into a very major threat. Uh, Whereas Logain, now also granted, Logain rose up in an area, Mirandi and Altera and
Which was very
Geldane,
fractioned, and you
which
could,
was already
yeah.
very fragmented. But he grew enough to make Andor concerned, which tells you something, as well as making the White Tower concerned. It we keep trying to stop talking about the terrible series, but it was one of the few things the series did well, was showing you showing you why Logain had a following.
Hmm.
It is because he didn't um cow you into submission. He convinced you. I'm watching a mediocre documentary on Churchill, that's on Netflix, and I'm trying to remember who makes the point. There's a historian who makes the point Actually, no, it's Boris Johnson, the former mayor and prime minister of the UK, who makes the point that in his speeches, the mustache man makes you believe that he can do anything. And that even comes, you look at his title, that he was the father of the country, right? He was daddy. Churchill, in his speeches, made you believe that you could do anything. We together are going to fight them on the beaches, fight them in those speeches. It's no, together we can do this, as opposed to I can do this.
Hmm.
And I think there's an interesting parallel there between Taim and Logain.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go further into that later, so let's go ahead and get on to the next
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Uh, Also, RJ was very masterful at giving Logain extreme aura with the few appearances that he got after his nuts, sorry, power got restored by Nynaeve. Wish we could have seen what RJ would have done with him because Sanderson kind of dropped the ball with my favorite character by how little he included Logain. Also notice how Taim is always resentful of Rand, as revealed not only from subtle hints, but from Perrin watching him talk in Crown of Swords, but he is always pretty quick to back down. Why? Because he has already betrayed him and is waiting for Rand to walk into the trap. His mindset is, I'm a traitor, so let me not push too hard so as not to be revealed. At the same time, there is a similar and obvious rivalry between Logain and Rand, but Logain never bites his tongue and doesn't shy away from confrontation. Why? Because he is earnest and sincere in his support of Rand. His mindset is, I've thrown my lot in with this MFer, so he better take this very seriously. I'm going to push him every chance I get. This same dynamic is common in real life, I've noticed. The ones avoiding confrontation will stab you in the back eventually. The ones you argue with all the time have their relationship with you forged in fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and put a pin in that because, like you said, you want to go more into that with
Hmm.
the Black Tower and the Rift there.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
think we don't need to beat up on Sanderson too much more because I mean,
we talked about that a good bit
yeah, another character
especially
ruined.
during the
This we'll
last
just
book.
we'll just add it to the list, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Which I
Um,
agree because Logain was a fascinating character for me as well.
I'm trying to remember if we ever actually see this, but he's RJ's sexy time is usually the old fashioned build up and then cut to black and then return, the old fashioned movies of they kiss and then it cuts to black and then they're sitting in bed smoking a cigarette.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to remember if we ever did actually see anything like this. But the second comment from Isomorphic, imagine having sex while holding the one power. Also, that moment when that Aes Sedai, who was described in text as hot, forces herself onto Dammer Flynn, promising to bear his children in exchange for learning his skills. That's the male fantasy right there. Uh, yeah, as we've talked about, as Peterson talks about repeatedly, is that competency
Hmm.
and potential are what women really care about, and all these other things that they focus on are really the trappings of those two things.
Well, and we're talking male-female dynamics in university too. I think this is one of the mistakes women make in cross-sex mind reading is men want to be women want men to recognize their attributes, their beauty, their intelligence, their those kind of things, and men want women to recognize their accomplishments. If if you could be the best looking guy in the world and someone says, "Oh, I liked you because you were good looking," there's nothing else special about you, or they don't notice anything else special about you. Yeah, you'll take the sex, but it's going to be transactional.
Also, how did I miss this? Also, while thumbing through Knife of Dreams, I discovered a Giga Stacy. Somarin, a Shido wise one, described to be 6'4", extremely hot, extremely strong in the one power, Olivia level, and with a bigger rack than Savannah. Damn. By the way, I typed this comment after sunning my balls. T and DHT are through the roof.
Oh goodness.
Get that D. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important.
Yeah, but
Uh,
is it Is the T by sending the balls through the vitamin D, or is it through the red light?
Good question.
I think that one's through the red light. I do have a red light machine. I'm gonna try that and see what happens.
Time for some experimentation. Yeah. Um, uh, which should for isomorphic should be relatively easy because I found when I was trying to refresh my memory on vitamin D, I found a study from a Scandinavian country that found that only um 10 to 15 minutes of unprotected midday sun exposure is the equivalent of 10 to 20,000 IUs of vitamin D. And for reference, if you take an over the counter, that's usually 500 to 1,000 um, IUs. And if when my levels crashed and I had to take a prescription, it was a 50,000 IU once a week. So that's so 10 to 20,000 is a lot. Um, but again, that was Scandinavia, so very light skin tone, which means you absorb the ultraviolet a lot quicker than if you have darker skin tones. So go down that rabbit hole if you're interested, because vitamin D is a very interesting substance in what it does for the body,
Mhm.
uh, and we're still kind of learning. Oh, it looks like it applies to this too, and oh, it may impact that as well. So
The
it's
problem
important.
with where I live is, as I was doing yard work earlier, is this time of summer is like the inverse of winter. In winter, you don't get enough vitamin D because the angle of the sun's too low. But we're at a point where to be out there long enough to get the vitamin D you need, you're basically losing 4 pounds of water weight. So,
Oh yeah, when it's 95 plus degrees Fahrenheit, and what have you got, like 80% humidity right now?
so somewhere like 70, yeah.
Yeah, 70 to 80% humidity is
So the
what we
heat,
were dealing
it would
with.
be, it'll be something like 95 feels like 115 or something like that. So,
So, speaking of Gigastacy, I actually want to start on before we get into the White Tower and Black Tower. Um, we missed a relationship that I think is very interesting because it's very one-sided because we only ever really see one person in the relationship. And I find her to be a very interesting character if you're talking about femininity, and that is Birgitte Silverbow.
mm,
So speaking of Giga Stacy's, the reason I find her so interesting is because of something I mentioned way back early on when you brought up that Nynaeve is one of, if not the most masculine female character in the book, which, as I said at the time, seems to be contradictory because you have so many other options, like a number of the Aiel who are described as very buff, very
mhm.
masculine in physicality. You have Lewin Shipless later, who is, a freaking brick wall
I
in the
think
way
I've
she's
taken that
described.
back because somewhere along our journey, I talked about her nurturing.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, but I'm going to get to that. This is where masculinity in a female is this is how it is different than in a man. This is, why it's a spectrum, but also still the yin yang symbol of complementarianism. So Brigitte is appearance wise like an arch female because she is described as because of how she is described. Okay. And the Watt fandom wiki has a nice little summary of the potential, whether conscious or subconscious parallels in mythology and real world stories for where she may have come from. And one of them that I hadn't thought about before or had forgotten about is Aphrodite. If you think about the way she looks, she is described very similarly to the Greek goddess of love, Aphrodite, the most beautiful female form in the world. And yet, she is the archer. She is an
mm,
incredible, and it's not just that her skill in archery is so good, but she is clearly very personally brave. She is
Hmm.
not afraid at all to put herself in danger. A very masculine trait. She is not afraid to. It mentions the story of Orpheus in Greek mythology, who descends into Hades to retrieve his wife, and the parallel there with Brigidy's story about going into the tower to try and find a cure for Geidel,
Hmm.
um, and how it doesn't work out. Uh, so that is a very masculine thing to do. Um, and again, but not just the way she's described, but think about the way she is with children. That is her real that is the real soft spot that we're first shown. Is first with Oliver, but then we start to see it with other kids. Is she turns from this, you know, Giga Stacy, as Isomorphic called her, warrior queen, which is again one of her uh, potential inspirations is a Celtic goddess slash warrior queen uh, called Brigid, and she just melts and becomes this. She just instantly becomes this kind of surrogate mom for all these little rugrats running around, all these these orphans and street urchins, and she just instantly becomes you know uh, uh mommy Birgitti to all these little kids.
Well, I would say it's kind of like the female version of the warrior poet with the man.
Mm.
The man who is strong and manly and hyper focused and competent, but he has this softer side for the females. But that she is all of those traits, and she has the softer side, the maternal side, to be motherly.
It's interesting that you say that because I'd skipped over, but there is this interesting parallel between Orpheus and Brigitte and Tom, because that Orpheus story applies to both of them. Because Brigitte tells this story, and then Tom much more literally, because in the story of Orpheus, Orpheus plays the lyre to try and convince Hades to release his wife, and that's very much what Tom is doing as they descend into the land of the Finns to try and rescue Moraine. Um, the
Well,
other
it's funny
interest,
because let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum. What's attractive to someone like Geidel? What's attractive to a manly man? The thing that would be attractive to a manly man is a motherly, maternal, nurturing female. What's attractive to a female? The romantic man. That's why we have stories that back, the gosh, why can I not? Why am I? Count of Monte Cristo is a good one, right?
mm,
Where he's very manly, he's very calculating, but he also becomes very attractive to the female lead in the thing. Uh,
well, that is a great point, and I was actually going to bring up the competency element again, because Geidel is a very potent
well, the optimum is
warrior.
both. The guy who's going to put in the work in the real world sense, put in the work. The guy who goes to work and does his job and brings home the bacon and takes care of his family, but then is also going to have the kind words and the bonding with his female partner. So there's the
The,
warrior
the
poet.
the bonding is a good word, because think about one of the very few times we ever see Geidel and see him interacting with him, and that is when Brigitte breaks the rules to talk to Perrin, and
Okay.
and he says, "What are you doing? You know you're not supposed to do that." He's trying to talk her out of it. He's trying to protect her, but when she says, "No, I need to do this," he's like, "All right."
Well, and there's so much talk in the the good relationship sphere. People like Adam Lane Smith talking about oxytocin and vasopressin and how they're different and why a man needs this and why a woman needs this. These tropes are a great example of this. And I kind of Wish they would bring this up. Maybe they haven't thought this level. Maybe they're too deep in the science. Bonding with your partner releases oxytocin. That one-to-one contact, that skin contact, that post-orgasm cuddling, that kind of thing raises those levels. The orgasm itself does for the female if she has one, which is probably the problem with a lot of relationships because
Hmm.
it's becoming more and more rare. But that orgasm and post-orgasm cuddle is huge for raising those levels. That's between the man and the woman. Vasopressin is doing things together, accomplishing things together. What better accomplishment than raising a child together? What better partnership aim than raising a child together?
Hmm.
So the best couples are a combination of that guy who can do the poet thing, the make her orgasm, basically, the end result, if we were to put it in physical terms, which buttering her up, go back to our all day foreplay. What better than the poet, right? To butter her up. And now she's more likely to reach that moment and then have that post cuddle and have that bonding with you and you having that bonding with her. But now you need the other side. You need the flip side, which is we need to do something together or the guy's going to check out at some point.
Yes.
And again, what better partnership in all of humanity than doing one of the hardest things in the world, which is raising a child?
Um, Scott, if you're out there and if you remember an isomorphic, I think you said you were doing another reread here, so maybe this is fresher in your memory. But a thought just occurred to me that I feel like there's a point where Brigitte is talking about her and Geidel. I think it's early on when she gets ripped out of the world of dreams and she's concerned about, okay, what does this mean for me and Geidel? No, you don't understand. We always have to be together. But I feel like there was a point where she's talking about them and their relationships and how almost always when they first meet each other in all of the lives she can remember, almost always they don't like each other. And that is an interesting element of that relationship that RJ is telling us about because one of the points the wiki makes here is that where the parallel with Aphrodite falls apart is that Aphrodite is forced to marry Hephaestus, who is the most beautiful and the ugliest. And so that's one of the parallels. This because the guy Cain is described as being short, stout, and ugly.
Yeah.
And that's Hephaestus. Hephaestus was the smith of the gods, who was, as if I recall correctly, Zeus tried to kill him, and so he's kind of deformed. Um, so Aphrodite resents it, and that's where the parallel falls apart because Brigitte does not resent it. She truly loves Geidel, and you see that with her concern, her instant concern of what the heck does this mean for me and Geidel is really her first concern when she wakes up from having been ripped out of the world of dreams. And I find that you talk about the bonding of that you see that in this relationship because they have to bond before that romance blooms.
Hmm.
They have to do something. Something has to happen for Brigitte to recognize the competency, the traits that she values, the traits that are attractive, and then she goes, "Oh, you know what? This guy's not so bad. Because there's a there, and then the romance blooms, and then it grows."
I'm trying to remember something, so keep talking.
Um,
It was from a professor that specializes in we'll say female happiness, but in the physical way.
so the 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 motherly instinct, I think, is very key and a big part of where um the divide between young men and young women that we've been talking about for a while now, I think is a big part of where that is coming from because you're not allowed. I mean, look at how much heat Harrison Butker, a freaking punter. No, I mean place kicker. He's the place kicker for the field goal kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, and people lost their ever loving mind. They wanted the NFL to censor him, to fine him, to punish him in some way for giving for a traditional conservative Catholic gives a commencement speech at a Catholic university touting the importance of family, touting the importance of a wife and a mother, and how much he values his own wife and how great a mother she is to their children. And people lost their ever loving minds, okay, because you're not allowed to talk about that. And I think that is a major reason modern writers can't write good, strong women. And this popped into my head coincidentally. I was having a conversation with my brother about sci-fi and good sci-fi characters, and he mentioned Ripley, and I hadn't heard this before, but apparently he'd seen an interview with Sigourney Weaver that she hated that take that everybody remembers as the icon, one of, if not the iconic moment from the movie Aliens of "Get away from her, you bitch." And Sigourney Weaver said she hated that the take that they ended up using, but then later grew to like it because she was trying to be stronger. She was trying to be harder, really, in the verbiage we use here about hard versus strong. But her voice kept cracking. Her voice kept going up, and she didn't like it. She felt it was bad. It wasn't strong enough. She was trying to get away from her, you bitch. But her voice kept cracking. It kept rising. Well, why? Because in the moment, think about why the Ripley character works, especially in that second movie. She had been stuck in cryostasis for so long, drifting in space, that by the time she's rescued and thawed out, she had a daughter, and her daughter's now older than she is. Holy crap. What does that do to you? And now all of a sudden you're thrown back into this horrible situation that you just got away from, because in her mind it had only been a day,
Hmm.
since the awful incidents of the first Alien movie, and now she's been awake for a couple of weeks, and they're like, "Yeah, we need you to go back and potentially face this threat again." And then she finds Newt, who is about the age her daughter was when she went to sleep. That motherly instinct is why Ripley is such a strong character, because she instinctively is going to protect.
Yeah, well, and speaking from a male perspective, this is also why we probably like her more than modern female strong
Mm,
characters, because our male instinct is to hear that raising of the voice and know she's scared
mm,
and know because if you end with a raising of the voice, you're actually projecting insecurity. You're actually projecting, and this is why if you're in a job interview, that's the worst thing you could do. You
mm.
don't want to talk and be like, "Oh, I don't like to raise my voice." It kind of sounded like what? A question? It kind of said, "Do I really like it? Do I not like it? Yes, I'm really good for this job." You hear the
Mm.
difference between, "I think I'll be really good for this job. I think I'll be really good for this job." You can hear the difference there. And if she's trying to make a tough statement, well, we can also tell she's super scared, and we're like, "Come on, you can do this. I wish I was there to help."
Yeah, it's a good point.
Versus what we get now, no, do this take until you sound like you are the hero.
And at that point in the movie, there's no one left. It has to be her, because all the other Marines have been killed. Hicks is incapacitated. It's just her. She is
Hmm.
the only one that can do this. So she's not going to back down because she can't. She's terrified, but she's still standing there. I think that's a great point about what makes her so great. And pick any female character from this series, and that is when they are at their best. Um, what the first thing to pop into my mind of a very similar moment in the story is when the the block from the compulsion breaks, and Nynaeve recognizes Moghedien, and she's furious, but she's also terrified.
Hmm.
But she's so mad and so righteously furious about this evil monster, she's going to fight her, knowing that she's outmatched, knowing that she's already been bested once, but she's not going anywhere.
Hmm. Yeah, that
The,
took us away from the thought I had about uh, advice for men. So I don't know if we'll come back to it.
let me segue into that because again, I wanted to talk about we've been talking about examples, but I want to try and have a basic definition of femininity and masculinity. And the masculinity part is easier because I don't know if you've noticed this, people watching out there, we're dudes. So it's easier coming from our perspective. And while thinking this through, it occurred to me that I think a good basic definition of what it means to be masculine is that you are both the immovable object and the unstoppable force. And the
Well,
trick is learning when to be which.
and the reassuring partner. I'm sorry, because we have to define masculine, and we've been trying to do that over time,
Mm,
and we've always pointed out that it's not just being tough. It's not just being stoic. And that's the big mistake the red pill community has. I am just stoic. I am just this. Okay, so we talked about female orgasm. So you did bring me right back to this. And I talked about how important that is for a long-term relationship from her side. And gosh, guys, it's fun to do, okay? And this is from all the research on the topic. How to make this happen, how to make this more likely to happen with the females. And they studied everything. They studied size, they studied muscularity of the man, they studied good looking, they studied tall. And guess which traits was the magic sauce? These things together. Dominant in this is in the act. Dominant but considerate, nice smelling. And this is important because females actually pick up signals through smell that are about compatibility and immune systems
hmm.
to have the healthiest child. So dominant but considerate, nice smelling, paying close attention, and then deep penetration. But, let me put an asterisk on that. People are just saying the bigger thingy. No, it's the clitoris itself, which is not just the little tip, but the inside stuff too. It's about 4 centimeters in size, or 4 inches in size. So you can get there. You just got to find the right positions, which is part of paying attention. So
That's yeah, that's a good point of
that's the magic formula right there.
but again, I would put an asterisk on the considerate because as we've talked about, I love the phrase from chatting with Candace Horbach of all day foreplay is that most of the time, if you have a subpar performance, shall we say, I think guys are going to think about it tactically, but you should probably be thinking about it strategically. What
Mhm.
really you should be thinking about it both. There may be technique that you didn't do quite right, but I would put an asterisk on the considerate because to me, part of the considerate is the what led up to it.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. This is I'm going to say in romance period, not just the act of it, but the considerate really goes with the dominant too, because you can be dominant in an abusive way,
Mm-hmm.
but you can be dominant in just the amount that she likes.
Well, the example we were just using, dominant but considerate, Geidel comes forward and says, "Honey, what are you doing? You know you're not supposed to
Hmm.
do this." He's standing up to her, but also for her to say, "No, there are rules and there are consequences if you break the rules." But when she says, "No, I have to do this. This is important." All right, well, I'm going to go sit over here because I'm not going to take part in this, but I got your back.
Well, and even things like nice smelling, that's not just in the act. That's before. That's your hygiene. How are you taking care of yourself? Are you healthy? Because you smell worse if you're unhealthy.
Mm.
Eat all of these things. So these all can be before or during, but yeah, that's the magic formula. And guys, it's going to change your relationships. If you wonder why she's pulling away or doesn't want anything to do with, it's probably you're missing something there or a lot of things there. And if you're in it for you, you're going to miss everything there, except for maybe the dominant.
I think that still works with my idea of the unstoppable force and the immovable object and knowing when to be which is, knowing when to. So when I say the immovable object, knowing when to say no and sticking to it.
Hmm.
And the unstoppable force is the, as we've talked about, several weeks back, I used the example of um, if we're in a bar and someone is hassling our us, we're probably going to roll our eyes and but if it escalates, then we're going to stand up and I got your back, or I'm side by side with you. But if you're hassling our ladies, no,
Hmm.
we're going to stand up and stand in front of them.
Hmm.
And I have a hilarious anecdote from the small town where my dad went to high school. They're a really small town in Oklahoma, and driving through one of the little city streets, I say city in quotation marks here. There's this big bend in the road, and he pointed out what that was from once when we were driving by. There was this huge, probably 200-year-old oak that the road went around. Okay, and anyone who knows an oak tree, a centuries old oak tree, freaking huge. Okay, these trees get big. Well, they weren't originally going to go around it, except the old guy who lived there, he had grown up there. He had played on that tree. And then his kids had played on that tree and under that tree. And then now his grandkids were playing on and under that tree. And he told the city council or county or whoever it was that was paving the road, you're not cutting this tree down. And they said, here are the facts and figures. It will cost this much more to go around it. We're cutting the tree down and we're paving the road. All right. Well, except when they showed up to cut the tree down, they found the old man sitting there in a lawn chair with a loaded 12 gauge. He never threatened, he never pointed at anyone. He just sat there and said, "What are you going to do?" He was the immovable object. And they said, "Well, looks like we're paving around it."
Which is funny because that story needs to be told on the congressional floor for the 2A arguments. Because that was a man against the government, and the deciding factor was the 12 gauge shotgun. And they try to make it a hunting argument. Both sides. I can't believe the right keeps falling for this argument. They keep falling back into it. It's
Mhm.
not about hunting. It's about protecting yourself from tyranny. And it's the reason that any force that invades our country is going to have a hard time. Yeah,
There are
Chinese
literally
army, let's
more
see how you
guns
do in
than
the fifth ward, okay? It's
there are literally more guns in America than there are people.
hmm And everybody's like, "Oh, well, you can't stand tanks and planes and all this." I was like, "Have you seen how the Afghan war went? A bunch of people with AKs against our tanks and planes. Yeah, we
Um,
beat the government, but did we ever get rid of the force that actually was there? No.
ask my wife's family, which who's from Vietnam, and they defeated like four empires in Vietnam. There's the Ming Dynasty, I think it was, tried to invade. The Mongols tried to invade. Um, actually five: the French, the Japanese Empire in World War II, and then the Americans. They defeated them all. Okay, why? Because they were the immovable object. They were the ones that sat there and said, if you come in, it's going to be trouble. And rather than saying this ain't worth it, all five of these empires said, we can take you.
Hmm.
And the point of the point of the story with the oak tree is he the old man was masculine enough to be restrained. Again, he wasn't crazed, he wasn't threatening, he never pointed the gun at anyone. He just sat there with it and forced the issue. He
And
said,
the great
"What
thing
are
about the whole story is we never know what he would have done if they forced his hand. It could have been all a bluff. This is why life is
mm-hmm,
poker, not chess.
mm-hmm.
It could have all have been a bluff.
but he forced the issue by saying, how worth it is it to you? Because this is what it's worth to me. And to me, that is a great example of masculinity because it is force, but it is force restrained. And I think you see that in the story where Rand loses it versus when he is properly masculine. And I think the great contrast there is him and Perrin, because Perrin is trying to figure this out, because he never wants to be too forceful when he needs to be, and Rand is going overboard with being forceful when he should be firm without being a tyrant.
Hmm. Well, so let me reframe this so we can go to our regular, the advertised topic for the day. Uh, Dominant, considerate, nice smelling, close attention, deep penetration does it for the woman to get them where they need to go. We're going to get where we need to go as a guy as long as there's enough reps. And for some, that's more than others, right? So we have to talk about what makes the man attracted now in a way, not just to do the deed, but to stick around.
Mm,
And so now we're transitioning to actually real pair bonding as opposed to, ooh, looks good, me hit, have dopamine hit. Okay.
mm-hmm,
Right. So the warrior poet is dominant and considerate, right? He pays attention. He is those things. What about the feminine side? And this is something I have no data to respond to because no one wants to study this. Because why do we have to worry about how to attract a man to stay around? Because girl power, you can do it on your own. You don't need no man, right? So we're going to have to just speculate here. And that maternal instinct is part of it. But we get that in the initial contact. We may see them with children. We may see how they respond to children. But in the initial contact, in the dating scene, we're going to get that with how they treat us and how they are when we actually make the step to be a part of it. Are they just submissive or are they trying to please me too? There's a big difference between those two because I'm going to get mine no matter what. If you lay back and starfish, I'm still going to I'm still going to finish. That's
mm-hmm.
just it. But if you actually show that you want to make me feel good as well, and you're interested in your own, you're not just trying to get me off and go. That would be transactional, right? I can get that by paying for it in certain cities. Uh, I do not recommend doing that, especially if it's not legal in your area. But there's a disclaimer. But it could happen, right? I could still get that. But we see this in listen to escorts talk. Listen to Isla. Listen to, oh God, I'm blanking on her name. I've listened to her a couple times, but she's an escort out of Austin that runs a boudoir now. And most people go to these women not to get off, but to be nurtured.
Mm.
These women, they will do the deed if asked, but they spend most of their time making him feel quote unquote loved. And they do it, and they're better at it faking than the person's partner is in real life. So are you a starfish or are you an active member of the process? Are you actively engaged in the act of sex? Are you actively engaged in the lead up to it by being nurturing? People say, "Oh," the woman says, I ain't gonna cook, I ain't gonna clean, I don't give BJ's, and all of this." And they say, "And then where all the good men at?" And the good man says, "Well, at home with a hot meal in a clean house, getting a BJ." Right? It's That's the way it is. And what is oral sex other than pleasing your partner, right? Because if some people are mentally get the dopamine hit from it, but as far as the physical part of it, you're not stimulating anything that is the pleasing parts, right? You are pleasing somebody else, which again, mentally can be stimulating for you, but physically, it is you doing all the work. And so We want to be nurtured. We want engagement. We want the act to feel like you're doing this with me, not it's just happening. And now let's go to transition to what's happening on college campuses and why the ratio of male female development and why we can parallel this to the White Tower. Because when you start to become in a echo chamber, and that echo chamber is preaching a message, you lose sight of the thing that the opposite sex wants. Because Captain Marvel, that's our idol. Boom, you're a strong female, and they better respect that or they're not the man for you. Well, yeah, we will respect it, but we also need the other thing, or we're not the man for you because we're leaving.
Hmm.
And so I think like sports is a fast track example of how to win in real life. Hard work, attention, conscientiousness, luck to some degree. All of these things play in, and someone's 10-year career, we can watch a 50-year career of a real life job happen. And you can learn the lessons from that. We all learn. That's why we look to Michael Jordan. How do we be better? That's why we look to Jerry Rice. How do we be better? That's why we look to, and give another example, Floyd Mayweather. How do I be better? They all have traits that are good for you in a long term relationship, in a long term career, in all of these things. Sex is a very quick crystal ball into an entire relationship. And that's why it's front loaded, because we're trying to make a lifelong decision, or at least a long term decision, based on this act.
That's a good point, and it's a a key problem that is why the overall story of the Wheel of Time and and what it I think maybe its main theme. You make the argument that the main theme that Robert Jordan was trying to explore was because he would have been at his age, when he was coming of age as a young man, he would have been exposed to this readily, which it was, whether you want, depending on how you define it, second or third wave feminism and the idea of the battle of the sexes. Well, wait a minute. It shouldn't be a battle. We're supposed to be complementary. And as I kind of had the epiphany last time or the time before of, huh, isn't it interesting that the the people who do the best, the people who are doing the most good, the people who are growing the most are the ones who aren't in either of these two poles, the White Tower versus the Black Tower. It's the ones who are with Cadsuan who end up bonding each other and working together without these hierarchies, without these rules and regulations, without these expectations and, you know, um, unwritten laws. That there are a couple of times where Egwene or other people are told, well, there are these unwritten laws that are sometimes even stronger than written law when it comes to how the Aes Sedai behave themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, who are the ones that are actually rediscovering the Age of Legends? It's the ones who have shed all that and are now genuinely working in a complementary fashion.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Cat Swain's a great example because she is very dominant. She is very strong, but she is also very motherly and nurturing. I brought this up in I think the last episode or the one before that, where she in her dealings with Rand,
Mm-hmm.
she had advice, but all she wanted from him was respect. And
Yes.
she never forced him into her advice. She just wanted to him to respect her when he disagreed. which is something he took a long time to come around to because he's a stupid young man, right? And with no mother, with no mother that to draw from his experience, at least not since a very young age. He didn't have a mother during his rebellious teenage years, right?
Mm.
So it was a struggle between the two, but it was the best thing for him because she embodied strength with femininity. Both feminine and masculine can be strong, but we have to do it slightly differently, especially if you're going to have a dynamic together, because then two strong people can get together. And that's actually the age old question is how do you weed out psychopathy, narcissism, and all these things from the gene pool? The answer is strong people.
That is the what just popped into my head when you said that about strength is a great example of that is Min, M-I-N, because she doesn't, okay, yeah, she has the ability to see the pattern, but that's not really a special power. That special ability doesn't give her any additional strength.
Well,
She's just a normal person.
well,
And yet,
one of my favorite things about her as a character is she actually had to learn this
mm,
because she didn't become the Min that we all loved until she was Elmendrita for a while.
that's a good point.
And she realized the advantage to being Elmendrita.
Hmm. And kind of her ultimate climactic moment of strength is when she becomes Fortuana's truth speaker, and she's like, "Oh crap, I don't want to do this. This isn't my thing." And but this is the best place for me. As much as I don't want to be here, as much as I would rather be at Rand's side, I can do more for him if I'm here.
And she stands up to Tuan.
She stands up to her.
You cannot kill this girl for
Exactly.
someone she didn't do. Something,
Hmm.
even if you think my vision is correct. And
Yeah.
that was actually a big meta point for Min because her whole life she was resigned to the fact that these things happen no matter what. And uh, she said, F that. I'm not going to be responsible for this.
Hmm.
It may still happen, but I'm not going to be responsible for it. This person may or may not have control over what she does to get herself beheaded, but she's going to at least have the opportunity.
Hmm. It was a great show of strength, but still a very feminine character. And it
Okay,
is that femininity that is a major component of what helps Rand finally shed all of the darkness. Cadsuin needed to be there to be a teacher. Nynaeve was somewhere halfway between a teacher and an older sister figure, but none of that would have ultimately led him to where he needed to go if he didn't have that close bonded feminine counterpart in Min to
hmm
be a true partner in the way that only a woman can be to a man. It's just, all of life's lessons can be learned in a country song somewhere. And Travis Tritt has a great one, "Love of a Woman," uh,
mm.
with a line that's something to the effect of, um, "My woman knows me better than I do. Funny how a woman has that over a man."
Uh, let's dive into the numbers so we can
Mm.
start transitioning to comparing universities to the White Tower.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And so before you show the specifics, is though I noticed this on this campus tour because there were about a dozen students, I think. Only three of them were males.
Which is more in line with these numbers than what I experienced, but I'm also getting a degree in the social sciences, which is even more skewed.
Hmm.
So this is from the National Center of Education Statistics, and we see a nice little chart of if we go back to 1950, there were more men than women, a little bit more
Hmm.
proportion. Well, I guess it's quite a bit if you do it as a percentage.
Yeah.
If you do a relative ratio, it's quite a bit. If you do absolute numbers, it's not. But I think relative is probably because there was just less people in university then.
Yeah, for those of you listening, it looks like roughly 1.8 million males enrolled and probably zero point 0.8 million
Yeah.
women enrolled.
So a 2 to 1 ratio. But over time, we get to 1980, which is when we were born, they cross.
Mhm.
And then the female end of that spikes rapidly around 2000. Yeah, that's approximately 1998, 2000. So when we were going to college, so it's right
Mhm.
in line with our progress, and it spikes. It actually peaked in 2010, which, gosh, go back to episode like 13 on what started happening in 2010. Uh, and then females to male ratio, it's approximately a little over 11 million to about 8.5 million for the males. Now, the actual numbers, according to Gemini, is 58% are female in the university population and 42% are male. Now, I did look up for context. This includes male dominant
Mhm.
universities. So Caltech is male dominant. Colorado School for Mines, Air Force Academy. That's important for our later conversation when we bring in the Black Tower. Uh, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. That can't be that big. So there are male dominant universities. So that means that the all the other ones, including your Ivy Leagues, which none of those were male dominant on that list, are having more than the 58% to accommodate to make that ratio work. So more and more the universities are being dominated by females as far as attendance, but also because of social political pressures, more and more they're being dominated in the administrative level, including the highest high. Because, for example, in the past, the head of the biology department in a university would be the top biology professor of that department. Now it is a doctor of education in biology person as the head of the because they're the expert in education. So who better to run a department and lead over all these people? But we also know by department, I probably could look up the exact number, and I will when you rant on this. The departments of education are extremely female dominated. So all your administrators, which come out of the Department of Education, all your teachers, I mean, we already know the ratio to teachers to kindergarten teachers is like 95 to 5 in male to female ratio. And it
Mhm.
gets a little better the older you get, but that's because coaches are forced to teach. I bet you if coaches weren't forced to teach,
It's a good point.
it wouldn't be as dramatic. It would be more dramatic than it is now.
Mhm.
So the people in charge of what you learn more and more is leading feminine. And we talk about the White Tower. The universities consider themselves the ivory tower of the country. And so my first thought on that, when you said this is the subject you wanted to talk about, is look at how the White Tower runs things. They run it in a way that is, we know what's best for you, so you have to do this thing, and they have the power to do it.
And look at all the pushback that Egwene gets for saying we should learn what we can from these other people.
Hmm.
The wise ones have things to teach. The wind finders have things to teach. Even the kin, who are people that we kicked out of our ivory tower, even they have things to teach us. And the Aes Sedai are just appalled that she would even think this, let alone actually try and make this happen.
Yeah, and I think the White Tower as the education system, actually, we could probably narrow that down to the White Tower as the departments of education and the Ivy League schools.
Hmm.
because we know best, and all of the other schools on the way down are going to defer to the Ivy League schools with how they do things, basically. And they're also the more likely there can only be one president of Yale, but there's hundreds of universities that can have presidents, and they're probably going to come from the Ivy League schools because they're just considered the top, right? And so if you got someone who's the top administrator from an Ivy League school coming out of college, or with the you got a middling administrator at Yale, they can easily be president of University of Colorado, right?
So I don't remember if it was the university president when we started or if it was later, but one of the presidents of the of Oklahoma State University when I was attending, he had gotten his undergraduate from Oklahoma State University, but his graduate work was done in an Ivy League, Princeton, I think,
Hmm.
Princeton or Yale. So even if they get their undergraduate degree from one of these quote unquote lesser universities, like maybe where they end up, being a the president or one of the major department heads, they did their graduate work in these insular institutions.
Hmm.
And one of the problems is, and where again, I think Jordan is so good at teaching these lessons without being preachy is this idea of the battle of the sexes. And if you are in a battle, well, then you're trying to defeat your opposition. You're not working with your opposition. They're
Hmm.
your opposition.
And
And
that's the power game. That's the power game.
exactly. And
And
this is,
the key word with power is control, because this
mm,
is the cancelable part of us. And this is why the male female ratio matters, is because if you make it a struggle, everybody talks about the patriarchy to control women. The mother is more controlling than the father when it comes to raising children. The mother is the protector in the first 18 months of their life. The child is going to put things in their mouth and try to put their finger in the electric socket and grab at the stove and try to turn on the burner. All of these things. And so that's a little protective in the first 18 years of their life. Over time, they become more intelligent, not intelligent, more wise. Even a 5-year old is more wise than an 18-month-old, right? And they start reaching a point where they actually mitigate their risk with known risk. So if I'm climbing a tree as a 8-year-old, I'm going to grab the branch and give it a test and say, okay, that seems stable enough. And then go to the next one. Okay, that seems stable enough, which is actually a very great activity for you as a child. Actually raises your IQ possibly by some of the data out there. But mom says, get out of that tree. You're going to fall. And dad says, just be smart about it, kid. So the control is don't do this, don't do that. I know what's best for you. Whereas male control is I will protect you from big dangers. I will allow you to explore. Don't do anything stupid or I'm going to kick your ass. That kind of stuff. And so look at the White Tower. We know what's best for the world. And we have a moment with Swan, with Gareth Bryan, right? Where
mm.
she forced him into a position and it turned out to be the wrong thing, but that's what the White Tower wanted, right? We know what's best for the world.
And I
Whereas the
love that
Black
moment
Tower,
because what does Brian do? He laughs. He
yeah,
laughs it off.
where the Black Tower is, we are a tool.
Mm.
And we are a tool, and you convince me you're what's best for the world. Now that's where it gets tricky with the men because it can be very good or very bad in that situation because Logan Time, I
Yeah,
promised I would
yeah.
contrast them because Taim would say, you convince me what's best for us, which is not me saying what's best for the world, like the White Tower. It's you convince me what's best for us. And with a tyrant, that could be gold, that could be land, that could be just power in general. That could be anything. You convince me what's best for the world, Logain. Okay, you actually convince me what's best for the world.
That's that's an interesting point because you see that contrast when Logain has his crisis of faith because he was like what dawned on me a couple weeks ago when we were talking about this. Oh, hey, Logain also got put in a box, much like Rand. And when he came out of it, he was different. And he
Hmm.
was very much obsessed power, with power so that no one could threaten him or, to his credit, it wasn't just about him. It was also about the Black Tower. He became obsessed with getting that Saw El Grial so that no one would ever put him in a box again
Hmm.
or the
But he
Black
was
Tower
also
as a
able to
whole.
overcome it. And that's the difference. So now let's Saki back to how the difference between Time's campaign and Logain's campaign was Logain found out he could channel. Automatically, men just kind of think, well, maybe I'm the next dragon, I guess. And at least the ones that know the prophecies and everything, he was an educated man. And he saw, well, I have to do this for the world then,
Mm.
which means I have to unite the world. I have to get everything together, and some blood will be spilled in the process, but it's for the best of the world here. And I think this is what we need. And then he had that ripped away from him. Whereas Taim said, this makes me powerful. I
Mm.
will be the dragon, but I am going to destroy everything in my way, and I'm going to do it my way. And that was the difference between the two. Taim wanted the power. Logain wanted to save the world.
Which is how, or one of the reasons Logain was able to overcome his crisis, but also because
Well,
we're not allowed to talk about this, he had a partner
mhm.
and to her credit, I'm blanking on her name. She had enough intellectual honesty and openness that she was able to change. She originally started this bonding with Logain to manipulate him, and then she realized he's not the monster I thought he was, and we can do a lot of good together.
Well, and also the directed tool, she convinced him saving those refugees was more important than the power of the tower.
The there's a great anecdote from was it the evacuation of Dunkirk? I'm trying to remember where someone someone in like the war cabinet was concerned with the losses of ships that were occurring, um, because we're going to need these ships if when or if Germany tries to invade us. And the head of the admiralty said something to the effect of, um, it takes 3 years to build a new destroyer. It takes 300 years to build a new tradition.
Hmm.
And that was basically what she was telling Logain is, you're obsessed with things. There are elements of life that are way more important than that.
Hmm.
Because what she was telling him is his you can start a tradition here of the Black Tower, the Ashaman. What does that mean in Rand's speech of why you're going to be called this? Are you really servants? Are you really here to help people? Well, then prove it.
And so now that we've the contrast between the White Tower and the Black Tower is established, including the interfighting in the Black Tower, which we discussed the infighting in the White Tower last
Mhm.
episode, uh, why that's important with the ratios in universities now. Uh, in my experience, the social sciences, which I'm getting a master's in psychology right now, is let's go to my statistics class. What better representation of the student body in your program than the class everybody has to take, no matter what you're interested in, which is the statistics class. 25 students, 23, well, 21 of them female, two of them they thems, which were obviously born with an XX chromosome, and two, did I get the math right? No, it's 22 2. No, that'd be 24. 21 2 2. Yeah. 21 2. Yeah, I got an A in that class. Trust me. Don't let today's math mess you up. But
This
21
isn't about
2.
math. This is about your old brain trying to
Yeah.
remember.
And two identified as males, but were obviously born with XY chromosome. Okay, so that was the ratio. in that class. And it's going to be the most representative of the program in general because it is the class that everybody has to take. So maybe I was on the low end if you had a range. But if you're looking at it realistically, that's going to be 2 to 4.
Mhm.
If I was in the low end, the median is probably two ahead, 2 to 4. The most, the only class I had a decent male to female ratio was skill development, which is a human factors class. And human factors is the engineers of psychology. They're the ones that are deeply steeped in information theory. They're trying to map the brain like a computer. And they're also, from a practical level, getting a job. Those are the people that are integrating technology into the workplace on a psychological level and, helping the human technology interaction. So that's going to be the most masculine class I ever take. And it still was dominated by female. It was just better than the others. And so
So it's interesting that you bring that up because my
it
last,
probably was on par with the national average, I would actually say.
Mhm,
And so this is important because education is downstream from people who do the job I'm looking at.
mhm.
Because all the literature that is done in the universities for education is done by the social sciences and psychology departments. And then the education departments use that research to develop their programs to educate our kids. And also, when we're talking about education in general, when we have this male to female divide, and we have a discrepancy in the STEM fields, as look at the first university that
I was
had the
just about to
higher
bring that
male
up.
ratio, Caltech.
Yeah.
So in the fields that are STEM, you're going to have a better ratio of male to female, no matter what. No matter how, we've talked about the egalitarian nature and people actually drift more. So let's face it, most of the degrees we're pumping out because people just get student loans and say they have to go to college are admin degrees. Ultimately, they're going to be business administration, not business. They're going to be medical administration, not medicine, because going to med school is hard. They're going to be just add administration to any field you can think of. And look at the rise in admin departments. Well, who makes the decisions there? In any company, admin makes the decisions. In fact, you can't even fire them because they make the decision on who's hired and fired. So that's why they keep growing as the people who do the work keep shrinking. And so now take that mentality we talked about with the White Tower. I know what's best for you. That is becoming more and more and more and more the norm and less away from how can we be best for everybody and everybody put your best argument forward. And no, it's do this, don't do that. You can't.
It's not just the I know what's best. It's the, all right, look, I think I know what's best because that's why I do what I do. That's why I think what I think. That's how I live my life. I don't know your life, and I don't know for sure that that it's what I would recommend,
I'm going to
but
take
I
it
don't know
10
for
steps
sure
further.
that's. But hold
I
on.
don't know real life
Well,
because
no,
I've
hold
only
on. But
gone through the education system all the way till I'm 25 years old and my
that's
prefrontal
true.
cortex is fully
But
developed in a place where I've never lived a real life.
the point I was getting at is it's worse than just I know what's best because the White Tower in as a metaphor for the ivory tower of the education system is, and this is the only way to do it. They are a very authoritarian
Hmm.
in their, not only do we know what's best because we're so much smarter and better than everybody else, but you will do it this way. There is no other way to do it. And that is not only um on its face absurd and wrong, but it's dangerous. And especially when you're doing it from a feminine authoritarianism is going to be a major turnoff to young men.
Hmm.
And we see that in the statistics. And this is the last point I wanted to get at with this idea. And I talked this out with my wife because that's how I learned how to talk without being too tismy. And I'm trying to remember how she told me to phrase this because one of my rants was about women in STEM. And it's not just that there are more women in STEM. It is the way we get there. It is that I'm gonna go back to why one of the examples I used for why I was so surprised at how much I liked the movie Superman, and what I think may be the best scene in the whole movie, which is when Lois and Clark are in her apartment talking, and they're it's a talk that turns into an argument, as happens with adults. Okay. But what was so shocking about it is it was well written, it was well acted, it was well directed, cool, but the substance of it is what shocked me because they were both right, but also both kind of wrong. Oh my gosh, nuance. How did this happen? They didn't elevate Lois, the female, the woman, they didn't elevate her by squashing Clark, which is usually what happens in modern writing, which is why it's such a turnoff. No, she made her point. She held her ground. They had a back and forth. They elevated both of them without having to squash the other one. The problem with the rising percentage of women in STEM is that it is being done at the expense of men. And you see, so I pulled up a statistic, and this is from 2020, and this is from Yale University. Okay. And the phrasing here, it illustrates what I'm talking about. Quote, nationally, women make up 57.3% of bachelor degree recipients, but only 38.6% of STEM bachelor degree recipients. So, see, they're automatically phrasing that as a problem. They're automatically phrasing that in the context of a power dynamic of a
Mhm.
we can't have this. Well, wait a minute. We've referenced this numerous times. I don't remember all the details, but a while back there was a very lengthy, comprehensive study done of why are there so many more men in STEM than women. And I don't remember who did it, but there was a study done where they started in elementary school with um uh back in our day it was called gifted and talented programs where you have the high percentile IQ kids in a class and they get to do extra stuff and they whatever. Well, they followed these kids and in elementary school you had a roughly 50-50 dynamic of high IQ girls and boys. And as they followed these kids as they grew, they all tested very high in STEM, but it was something like three-quarters of the boys went into a STEM field when they went into college, but only about a quarter of the girls did. Well, the research also showed that the boys only tested high in STEM. The high IQ girls tested high in lots of other stuff too.
Yeah, well,
Meaning,
it's not only that, it's people underestimate the fact the variable of interest.
mhm,
And when we talk about being good at your job, it's not always about ability. If you are interested in it, you are going to do a better job. And even the freaking interwebs that spread a lot of bad advice say this stuff that do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
mhm,
Well, I will modify that to do what you love and you'll probably be better at it. And to me, actually, I always modify that to do what you love and you work your ass off because pride comes into that. You
yep,
know, that's which is the positive version of pride. I need to do well for my own ego. I stress myself out at school because all I need is a B to pass. And frankly, in this degree, not to knock anybody down, a B is easy. But getting an A plus, that's really hard. The jump from A minus to A plus is exceptional in a lot of these classes, especially when they're fighting you the whole time because you're a white male, but the white straight male, the but a B is easy. I could coast to a B in every class I've taken. And but I'm stressing the hell out of myself, even though I know no one ever asks you your GPA in a job interview because I've been there, done that already. And I know that I can still pass the class and I can still get the same degree. That positive point of pride is like, no, you need to do the best damn job you can. And I think that's A plus work. And
And so the yeah, you wonder why there is a mental health crisis with young men. Well, because they are being pressured, forced, dissuaded, what have you, away from the fields where they have the most interest and would excel the best, and or if they do make it into that field, then they end up working at a place that even if it's a technical industry, the company isn't actually run by the technicians, it's run by the HR people who are women and or very feminine men.
almost completely.
And again, not to be complimentary, but to impose a power dynamic. My wife is a very good technical worker, but she's also more of a people manager now than an actual coder. Well, the reason for that is because she's a woman. She's a masculine woman. She thinks in a very masculine way, which is why she was a good coder to begin with. But because of her femininity, she's also very good at fostering good work, good group dynamics, which helps you at work, which helps you when you're working in a team that is part of a group of teams. So so that's not to say that oh, we shouldn't have women in STEM. They're not good at. No, we need both of them, but
Hmm.
we need them to understand that they're complementary.
Hmm.
In fact, her big gripe right now is that she was put in the current position she's at because she was told by a higher level person that look, this person who you're going to be working directly under has very good technical skills but doesn't have great people skills. You have good people skills, so we want you to help complement this person, and she's not being allowed to do that. And she's like, you put me here to help with the people side of this, and no one is listening to me when I try to explain why this or that is a problem because of the 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 way it disrupts the coalitional team building aspect of what we're trying to do here. All right, so those are my final thoughts on what we've been talking about here today. What are your thoughts here on this, Sam?
Okay, so we've been talking about HR and well, basically starting with the university, the echo chambers, my department being downstream from everything, and the divide between who goes into what and who doesn't. And add to that the just everybody has to go to university to get a job, so they're creating jobs for people who graduate with these degrees that you can only end up in an admin position doing, basically pushing pencils back and forth. Uh, I'm going to go even further than that because when you talk about the divide between we'll stay with STEM and let's talk about an engineering firm. We'll just say an engineering firm. And if we still have this discrepancy, I'm going to speak for men. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I have to believe women would feel the same way. Women who are good at their job. And you might be able to speak for your wife on this one.
Oh yeah.
You know what? I think I could speak for mine too because I hear her yell at admin all the time. And so I think it's the same. No man, and I'm going to assume competent in their field women like being talked or being told how to do their job by somebody who's never done their job. And I'm going to use a word here, which is the cancelable word, but I'm going to define it because it is a word used to dismiss the argument a lot when it comes to male-female relationships. It is a specific thing, though, and it is that thing. No one likes to be told how to do your job by someone who has never done your job. The word is nagging. I am specifically defining that because it is used to dismiss an argument. And what HR does to employees that actually do the job is nag them. The admins of health and admins of medicine tell doctors how to do their job. That's what you know what we call that now? Standard of care. When you go to your doctor, they're following standard of care. You know who made standard of care? Not doctors.
It was
Admins of medicine.
insurance companies and regulators.
Basically the hospital admins because they're covering their ass for a lot of things. And
Hmm.
so they're not allowing doctors to doctor because if you follow standard of care, you're less likely to be sued. So we're actually looking more at legal departments.
Yep.
And look at where a lot of the stupid shit started was in legal departments. Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, all of these people that are talking about narrative instead of what's actually true. So that, yeah, I'm specifically defining nagging. And what do we know from the history of male-female relationships is men often fight back, and this causes a lot of distress in relationship when they think they're being nagged. You should do this way. You should do that way. Da, 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 da. Specifically defined. I did all the stuff in the yard and I built the chicken coop. Well, you should have had the this up here, this da 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 da. Oh shit, I just realized I used an example that might be abrasive in real life. No, I was not talking about you, mom. I was talking about just in general. But I'm thinking way back in time. I'm thinking all
Hmm.
the way back to we became agrarian societies. Oh, you should have done this way. Oh, why didn't you come home earlier? Oh, da 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 da. That's what we're talking about. Why didn't I come home earlier? Because the job wasn't done and I had to spend extra time to do it because my plow broke. And I had to fix the plow and then reconnect it to the ox and then plow the field. So I was late coming home. That kind of stuff.
It's absolutely, I can attest to this, because this may skew in one direction over the other gender wise, but it is not. Um,
It's not exclusive. Okay,
it
so
is not. That's the word I was looking for. It is not
yeah.
exclusive at all because the biggest headache my wife has had recently is because they do twice a year performance evaluations. Well, the frustrating part about that is she has to do the evaluations, but she's not the one who determines, and not just her, but the tech people aren't the ones who determine how you're evaluated. That comes from the HR department.
Hmm.
And she kept getting, to your word, nagged. She kept getting told repeatedly, no, you need to do it like this. She would tweak something and no, you need to do this. She would send it back. No, you need, like 4 or 5 times back and forth to try and get these evaluations done the right way, as opposed to what she thought was capital R right. It's no, no, no. This isn't the proper procedure. This isn't the way we want it done. I don't care. I'm the one who directly oversee these people. And oh, yeah, I'm the one who also have the technical coding skills to know where they are strong and where they are weak. You don't know squat
Hmm.
about this, about what we technically do here, you twits.
I actually would love to see what's behind the scenes in one industry, and it's actually governmentally run in most places. What's one of our biggest complaints in Texas? Always construction on every freaking road you've got to take somewhere, and
Yep.
always at the worst times, in the worst moments. And I'm wondering if there's someone in an office somewhere, whether they're male or female, pushing a pencil who has no idea what the construction workers are doing, has no idea, and said, "Oh, well, this fit here, this fit there, oh, this time fit there." Because I remember one time you come down here to fish all the time, and 45 South is how we get where we're needing to go. Spring break.
Oh, jeez.
Galveston relies on tourist money to get for most of their businesses. because they're right on the water, and
Hmm.
they're central to Houston, so or they're local to Houston, so you can have a major city nearby. You have other major cities nearby, and people come to get to the water so they can do things on the water during spring break. 45 down to one lane. It's normally a four-lane freeway. Down to one lane, and nobody can get where they need to go. Who scheduled that? Who did not have the foresight to do this? It was probably some person who doesn't do the job saying, "Oh, they'll get it done in time," or "they'll do this," or whatever. And it's admins are ruining everything because they're disconnected from real life, from the real job. I see it all the time in home health companies. The admin departments, I've seen three fail over because I know a lot of people in home health, but they're the workers. They're the PTs and PTAs. They've worked for so many different companies because the admin says, "Oh, you need to do it this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way." And eventually there's so many this ways that the job becomes so inefficient, they can't pay the PTs. And as I made the comment that the admin is responsible for who's hired and fired, when the company starts losing money, they fire the PTs and the PTAs and say other ones do more work. And then those PTs and PTAs leave because they're doing more work for the same money and go somewhere else. And then the company dies and the admin goes, "What happened? We were doing our job. And why is the company dissolving?" Yeah, there you go. It's the disconnect, and this is the way our university system is being run, and it's because so many decisions are made from this echo chamber, just like the White Tower.
Hmm.
We need what was the one with Gareth Bryan and Swan? We needed this king to take over Morundi.
Yeah, that they had identified someone, a lesser noble, as someone with a high potential to actually ascend to the throne in Mirandi and actually bring it together so that it would stop being such a fraction in our world balkanized state that's a constant headache.
Hmm. And so we have what do you have in the White Tower? But people who have been selected young enough. Remember, they won't take you if you're so old. They'll just
Hmm.
make sure you live and then send you on your way. Uh, Selected at a young age, like 16, 15, 16 years
Yep.
old, and you're in this system all the way till you are the full-on member of this society and even become the top. So the person at the top has zero real world experience as an adult. And they think they can navigate the complex field of making the world right,
Well,
just like
no,
we
back
have in
to
the university system, because you're never out of school until you have your graduate degree, and then you end up in admin somewhere, including at the school. And then you're making decisions that affect the entire world, including the people that work it, when you've never worked a day in your life.
back to the Wheel of Time example you just used and why I love that scene because it's so hilarious, but also so insightful about um, men and women and their interactions with each other and their personalities, as well as to your point, the insular authoritarianism of the White Tower and the way Gareth Bryan laughs this off of, okay, so I never heard wait, I never heard of this guy, so I guess he couldn't have succeeded. What happened to him? And Sawan very sheepishly admits that, well, in one of these cross-border raids that you, Gareth Bryan, were trying to stop, and we stomped you down and told you to pull back because we didn't want you to end up killing this guy. In one of these cross-border raids, a shepherd shot him and killed him with a longbow.
Yeah.
And
Well,
he laughs and said, I guess you should have been regulating the shepherds. But again, she had no idea. He could have told her if she would have told him why, he could have explained, you can tell me to pull back all you want, but these shepherds and farmers, they're not just going to sit back and take this.
well,
This guy's not no longer in danger because you made me pull back.
let me take pressure off of us for a second by contrasting Logain, or even Logain and Rand, with Taim. How we talked about this a couple last, I think it was last Wheel of Time episode also. Yeah, because that was a comment contrasting Logain with Taim. How did Taim make people the next promote? How did Taim promote? He promoted from within And we talk about they had to be dark friends and all this stuff, but they also had to be within the system and insulated from the real world.
Mm.
Whereas Rand and Logain promoted from real world experience. So they promoted outside the educational system, where Taim promoted from inside the educational system, including the indoctrination system. Let's just say it for what it is. The conversion with the Murdral and the 13, the 13 Eyes That Eye
Literal
is
brainwashing.
literal brainwashing. So he promoted from within and indoctrination. And I mean, if you're a dark friend, you're part of a cult. There's an indoctrination process to that. You
Yep.
know, the lead ones, the Forsaken, had their reasons, but most people were brought in as a cult. So there's an indoctrination system to that. And so take it to the Black Tower, and you have power over all of these people as the Mahal. You can indoctrinate the vulnerable. Some of these people might not have been dark friends in the beginning, but they might have become dark friends. We never get clarity on that.
Hmm.
And so he promoted from the indoctrination system. And that's the direction that was wrong for the Black Tower, and we can all see it. Where Logain and Rand promoted from competence and real world experience. The White Tower only promoted from the indoctrination system. They didn't go to the kin and say, who's the best of you? That was Egwene's problem is they didn't go to the wise ones and said, who's the best of you? The Atha and Mir, who's the best of you? They didn't even consult Cadsuane. Who do you like? You who've been roaming the world for this long. Who do you like? Who do you think would do a good job? They promoted from within. If you were the White Tower through and through, you got promoted. All the sitters were lackeys, basically, to the system.
Hmm. Yep. No, that's a good point. It was lackeys of lackeys because there were all these insular little circles because the sitters so often came from those who were um closest to
The head of the
the
Asha.
head of the
Yeah.
Ajah.
Yeah.
And so there was, lackeys there, and then the sitters had their own hangers on, and then
You know,
yeah.
the male version of that, we call it the good old boy system, right?
Mm.
Yep. And and even when we had the divide of the tower, they did the same thing. And they tried to do it the same way, just in a different place.
Yep. Well, there you go. The old men have yelled at the clouds for quite a while. I didn't think we were going to go on this long, but it turned out we had more to say about this than I thought we did.
Well, we spent
Um,
a lot of time on the comments. If you've gone this far, you probably like the style. I should have opened up with this because sometimes we do spend a lot of time in the comments, but we've teased something else. And I'm actually curious if that turns new people away or not. So maybe we should do some episodes where we end with the comments
we
unless
used
they're
to
like
we
completely
It's a good
relevant to what
point.
we're talking about. And I don't, yeah, because we'll say this is what we're going to talk about, and then we talk about something different for like 30 minutes. And so I'm curious, ISO or anybody else, Scott, if you're around, who's stuck around this long, or somebody new who's stuck around this long, did would you like us to keep the comments first, or like us to end with them? Maybe we should try a little bit of both and see what we get engagement from. Uh, I don't know.
That's a good point. We used to end with comments when we were going through the books because the comments would all often lead into spoiler territory, and we always wanted to end with spoiler talk
Mhm.
for anyone who was doing a first read through. So may go back to doing that.
Okay, at least for a little bit, and if it doesn't help, then we'll do
Okay.
whatever people like.
Well, I don't know what we're going to talk about next Wheel of Time. Theoretically, we'll run out of Wheel of Time topics eventually and may have to transition to something
Well, no,
else.
no, I got an idea. Is
Hmm.
we have a social episode every Wednesday, sometimes posted on Thursday. If those that follow us, just depends on what time of day we can get it done. Uh, but maybe we just find a Wheel of Time example of what we talked about in that social episode.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, hey, sometimes we do a Wheel of Time episode and this is what we parallel here during that episode, just put a pin in it and then come back and do a Wheel of Time parallel to it because Wheel of Time parallels to so much because it's so complex. So,
Well, all right. I've got a tease for that of what that may end up being because I have been wanting to talk about this open, avowed Marxist, communist, socialist who's running for New York City mayor, and why that's a problem, and why it's not an isolated incident. And we have talked
Well,
a little
also a
bit.
product of Yale.
Yep. We have talked a little bit about from some of Isomorphic's comments about insular cultures and assimilation. And so I wanted to talk about that. And there is an interesting anecdote in the Wheel of Time with that, which is all of the refugees who are coming into the two rivers and what that does to the two rivers and how, okay, how does that change? But how can the two rivers also still keep its character
Hmm.
while including all these very new things and new ideas?
Yeah, and remember that was actually one of Perrin's struggles. So it was, hey, okay, so I have to account for two rivers. And he actually says it. He says we need to stay the two rivers,
Mm-hmm,
but this is a good thing.
mm-hmm,
And by the way,
mm-hmm,
saying you still have more business than you can handle
mm-hmm,
because houses are being made to accommodate. But also the two rivers is in a different situation than we were because the two rivers was basically a tiny place that used to be big. It used to be a major metropolis, major city. It used to have all of these things, and it's a remnant of that. Whereas we're not physically busting at the seams, but
mm-hmm.
economically busting at the seams. And, we have to have the happy number. So, trying to remember what year it was. It was before COVID. I want to say somewhere between 2015 and 18. Peterson versus Sam Harris debates. Remember those?
Yeah, yeah.
They had it was the first it was the third one. It was the first one where Douglas Murray was the moderator. And someone had asked a question about what do you think of the unbridled immigration? And Peterson and Harris both agreed. And Harris had the well, they agreed on the fact that there is a just right amount. And what we need to find is the just right amount. And that's what we need to be discussing, not yes or no. We need to
Mm-hmm,
find the just right amount. And they said it's a semi-permeable system. If you have a semi-permeable system, then you can regulate the perfect outcome from that, or at least close to perfect. And then Sam Harris compared it to skin. Said we do let things come through our skin. That's why we have lotions and stuff fortified with vitamin E and all of these things because they're good for you, but the skin is a semi-permeable. It only lets in the things that are good for you when it contacts your skin. That's why water rolls off, but oils kind of roll in. That's why we attach vitamins and minerals to oils to put them on our skin in the lotion so that some can get in and benefit us. Vitamin E, magnesium, all of these things. Magnesium is fat soluble. So we need a system that that allows for the good things to come in the amounts that are perfect for us. And we're not having that discussion because he said it's called osmosis, is what he said. It's osmosis. If everything comes in, then you become everything.
mm-hmm.
If
Staph. We've talked before about staph infection,
yeah,
staphylococcus bacteria.
but
So,
I hate to bring that discussion in that direction because that's we talked about the guy with the tiny mustache, the making things disgusting, making
mm-hmm,
things disgusting
mm-hmm,
to have the big point. Even with the non per the on the permeable membrane that just lets everything in, some things are good. But we need a system that allows only the good things to come in and not the others. So, and that's not where they're from. That's not anything about them except their intentions and what they bring to the table.
mm-hmm,
And otherwise, you just have osmosis, and with osmosis, you end up with the same thing on the other side. So if they're coming from somewhere that is not good and you just let everything in, you become the other thing. Whereas if you have a semi-permeable barrier, then only the good things get in and you become better for it. And yeah, it's a good it's the wrong discussion is the problem.
mm-hmm.
Yes or no? No, the answer isn't yes or no, is what?
Yep. Yeah.
And
Well,
how? What and how? What and how?
we'll dive into that and see how cancelable we make ourselves in that discussion. And
Yeah,
that's
because the
what we'll
Two
get
Rivers
into
is a
next
good
time.
example, but pretty much everywhere the girls go since Tanchico, because remember they're in Gehenna with all the dragon sworn and then gosh, where do we come across that all the time? There's like so many examples of that where these cities are being flooded and actually you end up with the Shanshan coming in and re-regulating the system in a lot of places.
We see that both in Tanchico and Iwudar
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah.
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 All right. Well,
All
that's
right.
perfect.
We'll see y'all then.
All right. Later.